Dr. Rob, how's it going?
What's up, dude?
How are you? How's life?
Life is good. A little tired. I guess I randomly decided to wake up at 4 a.m. today, and I
That's
couldn't
a terrible decision.
couldn't it was kind of made for me. My body made it for me, and I couldn't go back to sleep. So I'm tired. But
Yeah,
that just means I get to start work early, which means I get to finish work early, which means
yeah,
I
yeah.
so works out that way.
How about that super sweet losing streak that your team is on?
Oh, the Red Wings?
Yeah,
Uh yeah.
it's
This
nice to see it.
this is how it
Starting to
goes.
look like the Blues, man.
And this is exactly how it went last year. We started off really hot, and I got all my hopes up. I was like, "Oh dang, might be good." Now we started losing, so yeah, this is typical Red Wings.
Yeah, yeah, we're doing bad.
Yeah, at least the
Both.
Pistons are doing good though. I
Okay,
think I'm going to a game tonight with a buddy, so that'll be fun.
nice. I've heard of basketball as a sport.
It's I would argue the least entertaining sport to watch out of the big four, but it's still fun.
Sure,
Yeah, especially
I'm
when.
I'm right there with you. I choose not to watch basketball most of the time.
Mhm. Well, it's
If we're
just
going on
something
the
fun
fence
to
a
do
little
for
bit,
like
though.
tickets are like $10, so it's like why not?
Yeah, that's nice.
Hey everyone.
Hello. Hello.
Give it like one more minute. All right, we can get started, I think. Welcome everyone to our Hiero SDK community call. We got a couple things on the agenda today. So you just go ahead and start at the top of the list, I suppose. So I know, I don't think it was last week, but I think maybe the week before that we were talking about where the agenda for these meetings should be located. Currently, we have them in the SDK hub right now, but I think there was debate on if we want them to be. I don't think it was the governance repo. I think it was just another like Hiro Ledger repo. I think it was Hendrik. Were you gonna look into that? Or talk to Jessica about that?
Yeah, so we moved it to the TSC and discussed it in the TSC that it would make sense to have like a central place for all the projects and that this should be our governance repo. Roger, do you know if in one of those project setup and transition meeting, something happened about documentation?
I don't have that, but I know Jessica had brought it up at the TSC meeting last week, and I thought
Yeah.
I saw a pull request. I was trying to find it just now for
Oh
setting
yeah,
up
there was
something.
one. Yeah. Yeah. I'm
But I've
thinking like
misplaced it.
3 days ago, Jessica opened the pull request. Yeah. and she started to create project meetings for the marketing community engagement and added a first agenda to run. And that looks good to me how she started that. Let me just approve it and maybe share it here. So maybe then you can open it, Roger. Boom.
That was
This
in
one.
governance, right?
Yeah. That's a pull request from Jessica. The top one. So she created this project meetings main repo and then created like a README for the marketing committee subfolder and agenda minutes in the marketing committee subfolder. I think that's a quite good structure from my point of view.
Yeah, no, I think that makes, I think that was, this hits on kind of the main contention point we were talking about is how we want the agenda to be more public. And I think if we kind of have one spot for all agendas for all public meetings, then, everyone will know where to go. Um, Okay, cool. So I guess I will reach out to Jessica then, and then our meeting minutes for this meeting and agenda we can start putting them uh in this repo under this project meetings folder. Cool. Yeah, that sounds good. Um cool. So next, Roger, did you want to talk about the platform work you have coming up this week?
Yeah, so I think your dates are off by one there. On the 13th and 14th, after this week's releases for Rust and JavaScript, the platform CI team is going to be making updates to the overall the overall repos for Rust and JavaScript SDKs. We're going to be kind of flipping the order of publishing so that we go to Hiero Ledger first, and then in our publishing automation scripts, published a hash graph after publishing to Hiero. This is kind of the next step in our dual publishing lifecycle, getting to the point in January where we can only be publishing to Hiero. What that impact is for everyone here is all of the namespaces and imports and everything that are currently going to Hashgraph in the base code are going to be swapping over to Hiero Ledger. We're basically going to be taking the actions that we do in our publishing workflow and putting it on the main repository, and then swapping the operations so that we go back to the Hashgraph side for the secondary publish. That's kind of the update that we're planning there. So we wanted to do it at the start of this next release cycle so that if any issues came up with that after we did our transition, there'd be plenty of time to address it and get it solved. We've coordinated with Simi on this one over the last few months and making sure that we're in a spot to do it. But if you guys have any questions or concerns on this, I'd love to hear it now.
So this won't be a breaking change. This is just you're just changing up the order of publishing pretty much, but you're still
Well,
changing code
it's
too.
gonna impact every single source code file.
Okay.
So it will cause many merge conflicts, I'm sure, because anything that's currently importing from Hashgraph is going to start importing from Hiero Ledger. But no, the functionality of the SDK won't be changing. It's just where things are pulling from that changes.
Okay. So the team, the JavaScript team and the Rust team will probably be coordinating with you later this week on that in case there's any uh, conflicts that need to be resolved in any way.
Yeah, so my plan is to go in and update things on the 13th and 14th. Probably do Rust first and then JavaScript, and then we'll work together on anything that's impacted after that.
Okay. Um, I think the event you have in our Hashgraph calendar still have it for the 12th and the 13th. Just FYI, you might want to go ahead and change that. But I'll fix the agenda here if it's the 13th and 14th now, if that's what you were planning.
I do have it for the 12th and 13th. So I guess the only reason that I want to push it to the 13th and 14th is because I don't want to begin making updates and conflict with any publishing. But if the tag is already present on the 12th, then that shouldn't be a problem. Maybe I'll keep it at the 12th and 13th. We'll do it there. You're right, Rob. I selected great dates earlier.
Okay, sounds good. Well, maybe it's just like something you can coordinate with the team on. If the tags aren't
Yeah.
out yet, then you can push it back a day.
Yep. All right.
Cool. Sounds good. All right, next we have Hendrik. You want to go over some of the V3 stuff you've been working on. I think you mentioned in particular the key definitions you wanted to discuss.
Oh yes, I think that makes sense to talk about that. So oh yeah, maybe you can just do it and
Or
share
here,
it.
I can let you drive if you wanna.
Yeah, okay. Give me a second. So I was working on how to create keys like public key, private key, and so on. And in a meeting some time ago, Rob and I and some others discussed about how important it is to specify the algorithm a key is defined in, or if an SDK can, just automatically based on the string define what is used as an algorithm type for a key. And now I have opened everything. Let me just share it. And based on that discussion, what I already did is let me open. Why is it that slow? Somehow my browser is super slow. I created a pull request that defines a key algorithm and key encoding and changed the like version 3 prototyping spec to whenever you create a private or public key, you need to define definitely the key algorithm and definitely the key encoding that string is defined on. We now know that we need to do the key algorithm because there are like things where you cannot automatically get it out of the string, especially with algorithms that might or will come in future to Hiero, that it's not possible anymore to just with the raw string information get the key out of it and get the algorithm specification out of it. What is not sure now is if the key encoding need to be specified too. And the other thing is, independent if we need to add the encoding or not, if the SDK in future should be strict and say like, let me move to that point where we discuss. Maybe it's better than you share it, Rob, because somehow my browser is just super, super slow. I don't know why. Yeah, can you share it with our discussion? Thank you for that. Another thing is like, should we check if the string, for example, starts with 0x, or do we say it need to start with that, or do we say it's not allowed to start with that? So there are a lot of things, I don't know if we already have some specifications for any of those written down somewhere, maybe Rob or I see Keith just joined, maybe Keith knows. And if not, I think it's super important to define exactly that. What input we assume or allow and what kind of input we don't allow when creating a key out of a string.
Yeah, I mean, I think now the SDKs do offer the ability to, uh, I guess, well, it can read the algorithm type based on the encoding, like if it is encoding, so it can determine if it's like a ECDSA or an
Yeah.
ED25519. But yeah, as far as like going forward, adding additional key types, I'm not sure how robust that will be able to be, just because I'm not familiar with, the other key types.
Yeah.
Um,
And I mean, there we already know that there will be problems, right? That is what Rohit, for example, told us that there are some types where it won't work.
mm,
Um, and with that in mind, we should create version 3 already, then with those types in mind. And especially if I look at the current implementation, it's like I try one version, I try a second version. If any exception is thrown, then I just defined it's like version 3. And I don't know if even that is really 100% always correct. I see Keith has hands up.
Yeah, can we back up, Henrik? What problem are we trying to solve? Because I don't like this proposal because I don't want to make every developer have to become a crypto expert. I mean, it's already
Yeah,
ECDSA versus ED2519 is already pretty confusing. If you make people also understand deer encoding, I mean,
yeah.
they got to spend like an hour researching before they can like use our SDK. So this seems to be moving in the wrong direction.
I agree on that. I do not like it. I can tell you that people who know all that told us that what we want, just put in a string magically and everything is figured out automatically, is not working. That is the information we got. and and with that information, especially with moving forward now, the question is, how do we move forward? I mean, we could still say we have a factory method or whatever that just gets a string. But then we need to say that string, for example, must be in format whatever, because just saying it could be everything will not work in future. That is what we know today
Yeah,
from like Rohit and others,
well,
And
I don't know. I mean, Rohit almost never. I mean, okay, I won't. But my question, I think we need a baseline because from what I've seen, the SDKs work okay today. Like you can enter, okay, I'm using an ECDSA or an ED25519 key, and then
yeah,
you like
yeah,
for ECDSA or for ED25519, you can enter a deer encoded key, or you can also enter a raw key. It does work.
yeah, yeah.
You wouldn't put a 0x in front of an ED25019, but yes, for ECDSA, I don't know. I've never tried putting an 0x. I don't know. But like
Yeah.
I think it'd be good to baseline on the behavior because yeah, just because somebody says to us that it doesn't work today, that means that maybe they're just confused about the different key types for all I know.
I agree, and I'm not saying we need now like all that complex methods. What I'm saying is we need to figure out in future what will be possible and not, and where we maybe need to add complexity because what we have today will be deprecated in future anyway. And then for like prototype of version 3, we could have already that in mind. And when it goes to encoding, I have no clue. So about encoding, I have not talked to anybody and I have not found a good documentation. For key algorithms, what I heard is there might be others in future, and with that, how the API is defined today will not be possible anymore. That is the answers I have today, right?
Yeah,
and we need to
right.
do something based on that.
In the future, we might adopt a quantum safe key. That's probably a couple years away. And yeah, then we'll need changes. But I mean, for now, if I was from the PM perspective, what we want people to be using are ECDSA keys. We want to push people to stop using ED25119 keys unless they really want to. So therefore, like the default should be ECDSA. And then if they really, really want to, we will document how they can use an ED25119 key.
And I like that. I mean, for me, it's totally fine to have a method that only gets a string, but maybe then we need to define if you use that method, the string must be that encoding and that algorithm, as an example. And then you can have like additional methods where you can specify an algorithm and then put a string like that. But currently we have this, oh, let's try this out. Oh, it's not working. Let's try this out. It's not working. Let's try this out. Oh, if that throws an exception or an error, then we just set it to the last option we have at all. That is currently how it's implemented. And when looking at the implementation, you already got a feeling about, oh, is that really like how it should be? And I totally agree with you. I want to have it as simple as possible, right? My wish would be to have one method and out of a string something is created. And that's why I brought it here to discussion to think about what different, I mean, at the end, it's a I don't know, like metrics or whatever with several accesses. But if we can define that as a default that 99% do, then we could define that as the most common method without any parameters. But I think it would not be good to have a method that, by doing some tricky magic that is in several languages, I assume, implemented in different ways anyway, trying to figure out to get what algorithm it is.
Can I
Yeah,
just,
plus I think we've run into problems in the past too, where I think even like doing DER encoding like between different SDKs, like since we use different libraries, those encodings end up being different.
Yeah.
Still technically correct both ways, but different. Yeah, which has caused confusion before too.
yeah, but that's a different, I've already been asking for many, and I'll continue to ask that we should just stop using deer encoding. The portal should stop using deer encoding. Our SDK should stop encoding when we generate keys. We should stop deer encoding. I mean, deer encoding is a nightmare. If we want to make our lives simpler, we should just get rid of deer encoding. Like I'm just like, there's different ways we can approach this, and like the easiest way to approach this, from my perspective, is to stop using deer encoding because we strip it away anyways. Like the first thing the SDK does is get rid of that encoding. So yeah, what's the point?
But it can use that encoding to determine what the algorithm is, which makes it easier for users. If they just get a string of bytes, they can just plug it in, and then the SDK can figure out if it's an ECDSA key or ED25519. So we would be losing that if we just
Yeah,
strict.
but we don't do that, right? Like you have to specify whether you're inputting an ECDSA or TED. Like we don't detect it. We don't use the deer. If we use the deer encoding in that way, I would agree. We don't use it in that way.
Uh, I thought we did.
Yes,
Did,
that is,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Like
So
so,
that's,
I think that there's been kind of like I know that like at least for example there's like a basic like from string method which does like determines the algorithm from the DR encoding, but then we also have like from string ED255 from string ECDSA, uh, which yeah
Yeah,
would
that's exactly my point, Robert. You say from string ED. That means you're not. If it was just from string and then you looked at the deer encoding and figured out what kind of key it was, that then you're using the deer encoding. Because you're doing from string ED25119 or ECDSA, you're not using the deer encoding.
yeah, but SDKs are doing that now, I thought.
yes, that's a point, Keith. So maybe we can give me a second. Let me just open an empty file in Visual Studio Code, and maybe then we can have a short create an.
Yeah, at least like the SDKs that I've worked, which I mean have mostly been the lesser used ones. They do that. I guess I haven't looked too hard. Does the JavaScript one do that and Go and Java? I see Falcon.
Repeat once more
Could
what
you
we're trying to
could you
figure out.
maybe
We're trying to figure out if we use the encoding prefix in order uh, to see what the if we're using KCDSA or 825519, is that what we're trying to do?
Yeah, if we have like just like a basic like from string method that uses the DER encoding to figure out what the key type is, the
can
algorithm.
you give me access to the screen or let me share my screen? So what the problem that we have is let's make the two extremes. So this is input and the other one is key algorithm A and key encoding E. So today we have line 1. If we really want to be flexible, we need line 4. And where I totally agree with Keith is that that creates a lot of complexity. So what we should figure out, can we keep, for example, with line 1, but instead of having some magic internally that works in most cases or the cases we have today, but will not continue to work in future cases, could we say like must be key algorithm X and key encoding that as an example? So that is a question. Can we define something like that, or could we maybe key encoding always do with magic? But I assume we cannot. I assume we have the same problem with key encoding as with the key algorithm, that you cannot just get it out by magic.
Yeah, I mean, I think the like with the various from string methods we have today, like basically it's basically like it's saying like if you know that your string is, for an example, ECDSA type, then you can go ahead and use the from string ECDSA function. Um, which I guess I don't know if that specifies a particular encoding as well. But
Yeah, that's the point, right? Then you have the encoding problem, and next to that, let's assume, I mean, today we have 2 encodings, we know more will come, and you don't want to create a new method for each encoding. That's why I think having an enum makes sense for it, for the algorithm and for the encoding, instead of having in a worst case like create from ECDSA. And if we know there could be different encodings, then a method would look like that. And I think that is not what we want, right? So here I think for a clean one, it's better to have enums, but I agree with Keith from the complexity one and to show easy examples. Best is to have what we have here in line 1. But for line 1, I assume we need to then specify that it's a specific key algorithm and a specific key encoding. That's my assumption. And it's only assumption, right? So I'm not saying technically everything else is not possible. It's an assumption from what I know so far.
yeah, so it sounds like the problem is we're basically just trying to balance like simplicity with the complexity that this will inevitably get to. I'm trying to figure out like what the best solution for that would be. But
Well,
I think it sounds like for now, like what we have now, like just the basic like from string, and if other SDKs, don't use the DER encoding to determine the algorithm, I think that'd be a good thing to implement. Um, So then we can, make that simpler where a user just has a random key string. They're like, just throw it in the from string method and it'll be able to figure out what it is and do everything for you. Like, I think that's very good.
I agree. Yeah, but we need to specify then exactly what can be thrown in, right?
mhm.
So I mean, but then you have to take a broader view, right? I mean, the reason why I'm against deer encoding, okay, I accept if everyone used it, it would make it much more simpler to identify keys. The problem is deer encoding was like used in X509. It's not used in it's not used in the Web3 ecosystem anymore. Like nobody uses it. The tooling to encode, please someone try to find me a tool, or okay, I know one exists, but like it's very hard for anyone outside of our SDK to move keys in and out of deer encoding. We also, what we do is we get a key deer encoded, and the first thing we do is we strip out the deer encoding, and when you look at the Hedera mirror node, it's not deer encoded. And that means if you're just a general user, you're like, oh, this was the key I entered in the SDK. This is the key I see associated with my account in the mirror node. They're not the same. It just like deer encoding causes so much, okay, at least for me, deer encoding causes so much confusion.
Okay, and do you think then we should remove encoding totally and just say we only allow one encoding type?
I mean, when it comes to encoding types, we keep on, maybe it'd be better. Like the encoding types I see that are used for our keys are deer encoding, raw, and in the ECDSAs you have the 0x prefix. That's sorry, there's some other ones. Like I guess more rarely, if you look at our mirror node, you see like the 4-digit prefix for some keys. So um maybe it'd be first good to define when we say encodings, what encodings we're talking about. Because
Yeah.
and then there's like thousands of other encodings out there, but we don't support them. So I
Yeah.
just I want to come back to your user story, Hendrik, about people having the experience of like entering keys not working, entering keys not working.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
what was that? What were they trying to enter that was not working?
I assume they did it with an 0x or without an 0x, or I don't know. I mean, it was really like, so we have like ESDSA and we have, I always miss the other one. Then you go to the portal, to the Hedera portal. Then you see like X different string representations of keys. And some of them you could put here, others today you could not put here. And even I could not tell somebody that is exactly the key you can put in, and that is exactly the key you cannot put in. Maybe this is even SDK specific. I don't know. That's why I'm trying to do a definition here, that we can then have in all SDKs. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just curious about that user story because I mean, in the portal you have like hex encoded, you have things, but like you can, as far as my experience is that yes, as long as you like if you define that your key that you're inputting from string is ED25019, then you can input all of our supported encodings and it just works.
And the ESDSA for that one, it don't work.
No, you certainly need to specify if it's from string ECDSA or from string ED25119. That's the one thing you have to do. But as long as you do that, then it's going to work.
And let me go to portal.hedera.com. Maybe it's even like specific to some SDKs, I don't know. Maybe the Java SDK has a limitation there or whatever. I'm fine to say if from a technical point of view we can do that, say like, hey, the format or encoding, however you would like to call it, is you can put anything in it. We don't care because we can figure it out programmatically. The only thing we need to know is Is it ECDSA or is it ED 25519? If we go with that, then I would be fine. So so what you are saying is for ECDSA, you could take the hex encoded private key and the DER encoded private key and put it in.
Yes, I mean, there's one thing I would add is that if you actually look at the hex encoded key, we actually prefix it with the 0x. So it's on the portal, what I'm looking at right now, it's the
Yeah.
0x hex encoded private key and
Yeah.
or a
Yeah.
dir encoded private key.
And I'm very sure that maybe it's fixed or maybe it was not working sometime, but copying that and put it into as a string, at least in the Java SDK, didn't work.
Okay, I think this is where we're going to be hitting differences because on
Yeah,
the JavaScript SDK it
yeah.
works. So
Yeah.
maybe this is a good thing we need to pull out.
Yeah, and that is just what I want to do, like to get a definition. So for me, it would be fine to say like this is ESDSA and it could be hex. I mean, we have raw what is meant with hex then in the encoding type, because in the Java SDK we support two different encoding types. That is like by the implementation today, which is raw and DER. Those are the two different types we support.
Well, I mean, the difference in okay, in my mind, raw. I mean, I shouldn't say raw. I should say hex encoded or hex encoded with 0x prefix. So on our portal, we have hex encoded with 0x prefix. I don't know. I need to test. I think you can remove the 0x prefix and it also works, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Yeah, and me too. So we have hex encoded with 0x. We have hex encoded without. Let's do it like that. Without 0x. So what is raw then? Is it like one of those? Because that is something I do not understand when looking in the code. I see either it's DER or it's raw. That is what the code does in Java as an example.
For me, raw is without their encoding. The raw key it might work with 0x. It should actually work without 0x all the time, but depends on the library that we are using. But
so that is what you want to raw.
For example, in Go, row is hex encoded without 0x. And this is because the library we're using under the hood only works without 0x, so we are stripping the 0x. If it exists, and if it doesn't exist, we just don't do anything. So under the hood, we just have a logic that is like replace if exists or something like that, or replace it's a prefix. So yeah, replace prefix or something like that. But yeah, I guess it depends on the implementation that we're using under the hood.
Yeah, and that is something we should fix, I mean, it's fine for me to say like what today is raw is that, and I just put this one here, right? So this is not the official format name, but I agree we can have hex with 0x, hex without 0x, and then we could have DER. So those are the three formats we currently have, right? And a DER, so how can somebody figure out if a code is DER encoded or hex encoded? Because looking at the string, both, I could not say if a string is hex encoded or DER encoded.
Well, the biggest indicator is that the key will start with 302. That's the kind of the indicator to people that it's a dir encoded key.
Yeah, but the hex
I think
can start
it depends
with
on the underlying library they're using. Like it may not always be the same across different libraries or SDKs. I think the underlying library itself, I think will usually encode them the same. But that was a problem that I think we had a while ago that encodings were different across SDKs.
Yeah, and the other thing is an hex encoded without, I mean, for sure without, but an hex encoded without 0x can start with 302. And that is my problem I'm seeing here. So from my point of view, from a technical perspective, you cannot say, hey, it's exactly this or it's exactly that. And that is why I think we should make a hard definition what could be put inside we only put the string in it. And maybe that's then hex encoded without X or hex encoded with X, whatever. Or we could even merge those two and say it's hex encoded and we check if it starts with 0x or not. I mean, that is something we could do programmatically because X is out of scope of
Actually,
hexadecimal.
also hex. DR is also hex. So there or DR or however you want to call it is just a couple of it's just a string that is
Yeah, exactly.
appended before the actual key. So it's still technically still hex. The whole thing is still
Yeah.
hex. But I think what we need to do is to have a clear goal, what we're trying to achieve from these changes, and if these changes align with what we're trying to achieve. Because right now, I don't think we have a set clear goal what we want to do. Maybe we need to spend some time asking developers or some of the community members to have a clear goal what we actually try to achieve, and when we have that goal we can try to figure out a API that suits that goal.
Agree. So I think what our goal must be is that, right? So we must have something that even for edge cases cannot end in wrong values. And when seeing raw or hex encoded and DER, that is already a problem. And that is why I think any method we have will end in something like that. The question is, having no key algorithm, what will be the default? Having no key encoding or key format, however we want to call it, what will be the default for that? Because I think without defaults, we will always end in a point where edge cases cannot be handled in a reasonable way.
I think, Henrik, I mean, take this room. This room is full of smart people who've been working with these keys forever, and yet none of us can really truly define our key encodings. I mean,
Yeah.
if you gave us a test, we'd probably all fail. So, like, what does that tell us? That tells us that if you asked everyone in the community to define their key encoding, you're going to create chaos because these things are not like, are we going to make people read cryptographic specifications to understand that? And then people implement key encodings in different ways, and it's just, I mean, why would we want everyone to have to understand that?
Oh, I'm not saying that we want to. What I'm saying is having a method that only gets a string must end in the correct thing. And that is technically not possible. So we can either say we do a more strict specification here, or we say, yeah, maybe if you put something in, it's wrong and it's not working. We have those two ways. Or the third way is say you need always to specify that.
Yeah, I thought that's what you were saying. What we have to head towards is that you have to specify, and I just really don't like that.
Oh no! Internally, that is our internal thing, and I mean people could call it. I assume that is something that makes sense in a private API, but this one, I don't know how to make such an error.
Okay. I understand. Sorry, I was confused. I understand that. So then
Yeah,
you're talking
okay.
about an internal method.
Yeah. So line 4 will somehow internally call line 8 And the point is, we cannot just from the string find the algorithm and the encoding always correctly, which leads, from my point of view, to a point where we need to say, hey, if you call that method, key algorithm must be like this and encoding must be like that. So that we have a range or exactly one that is technically always 100% in any language doable. That is the idea. And I have no clue what would be the, hey, let's use exactly that. That is where I would like to have input, what should be the default, or what should be done when, or what should be valid input for such a method. If we say it should be hex, which is called raw, today checking for 0x or no 0x, that's a no-brainer. That is not the problem. But checking if it's raw, which means hex encoded, or DER encoded, that is technically a problem.
Yeah, I feel like it's gonna be hard to define exactly how we want to do this. At least, like for me, it's gonna be hard for me to kind of contribute ideas until we know more about what types of keys might be introduced down the line. Because in my mind, like where we're at right now, like we could just have one simple create function that is, you know, if it anything is inputted, DER encoded, then it's like we can figure out the algorithm from that, should be fine. But if it's not, then uh, the function doesn't have enough to determine like what type of key it is. In that case, we could just, if we're trying to push ECDSA keys, then we could just, you know, say, or if you're putting in a raw value, then we're just gonna make it an ECDSA key. But yeah, again, that could easily change down the line. So
Yeah.
maybe do you think Rohit would have any input on this? Maybe we could invite him next week.
For sure we can invite him, and I think he will have input about what is possible and what not. I don't know if he has input about what makes sense and what not. So my assumption is, when going to the portal, the first key I'm seeing is hex encoded private key in ECDSA. So that is what people see as the first key. So would that be something where we see ESDSA in?
But it's hex encoded with it's a 0x prefix. I mean,
Yeah,
if you look
yeah,
at
yeah, yeah. With hex.
Does the 0x prefix really matter? Because it's like we can easily.
No, we can raw without 0x. That's just a check. Like, is the string starting with 0x? If not, we add
Right.
it, or if it adds, we remove it. That is
Mhm.
fine. But this is something we need to specify. That is what I'm asking for, and that is nothing I want to specify. So here it really would make sense to hear what is used the most, maybe what we from a strategic perspective want to push, and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you input a string that's DER encoded, you use whatever the DER encoding specifies, and then if it's just raw hex, then we make it ECDSA because that's what we're trying to push right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's
But
like, this is then ECDSA with hex, and for everything else you need to use this method.
sorry, were you saying you didn't want to expose that second create method? You wanted to keep that private?
Oh no, I would like to expose that. So that
Okay,
would
yeah,
mean like we have those two methods exposed, and this is the easy peasy that people should use. And maybe you have a key store where it's even stored in a totally different way, then yeah, sure. use that method. That's fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think yeah, at least for now, those two methods like I think would cover like all our cases. Yeah, you have the easy peasy method, and then if people want to get more specific, then yeah, I think you only need the algorithm and the encoding. I don't think you need anything else. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's in my mind, yeah, it's just a matter of whenever these new types of keys come down the line, then uh yeah, we'll have to figure out something else. Which, I mean, if they're still a couple years away, then we might
Yeah.
be on
Yeah.
V4 by then. So,
Yeah, I agree. But I mean, we will not have like mid next year a V3, you know? So whatever we do now should take care about what is maybe in 2 years.
mhm.
On the other hand, I agree. The worst case would be if we in 2 or 3 years say, now we have algorithm, I don't know, like HyperX, whatever it is called, right? And we want that this is the default. There are two ways. Either we could say, starting with version X, the normal create method needs the input in that format, or we deprecate that one and create a second method that is then create by HyperX and just put in a string and say that should be the default. Yeah.
Hmm.
If we do it once, I think that is fine. It would be horrible if we have like 10 different methods with create by whatever algorithm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, ultimately, it would just depend on whichever one we want to default to.
Yeah.
Yeah. If we still have that second one, then people can still create whatever key they want. But yeah.
Yeah. So does that make sense to everybody?
Well,
What do you think?
to me, I guess what this conversation's highlighted, Robert, is that we have inconsistency today. Without doing anything, we have inconsistencies about how we deal with keys across our SDKs. So maybe that's something we need to look at.
Hmm. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, something V3 will solve.
yeah, and I would say we assume we have inconsistency, right? Because maybe some things are already fixed, maybe it was a bug, whatever. But I think it would make sense to check that.
Yeah, I can make a note.
So seeing your comments, Sophie, would that work for you too? Like having that as a default then, but to be able to solve every possibility, be more strict in the default and have this method then that allows everything with configuration?
Yeah, so I've done a fair bit of work with keys, but I'm not an expert. So
Me neither.
I'll give my opinion. I'll give my
Yeah.
opinion,
Yeah.
but you'll have to filter through it whether it's actually reasonable.
Yeah.
I like the default method, and I think defaulting to EC DSA makes sense compared to the ED 25519. In the Python SDK, we have we use like different string methods already, but we also have the general method. So I guess we were kind of leaning towards wanting simplicity, but having some problems with the different ones. Yeah, I like default approach. That's easier. And then you also have like if you wanted, you could do something more complicated. I wouldn't know what the implications exactly of that would be.
Hmm.
So
But I think first of all,
also
then
like for consistency with the SDKs, I think we would have to learn more about that. That would be like a longer process to get to kind of be able to have consistent SDKs.
yeah. So and I think here it's really interesting. Rob, can you try to invite Rohit maybe to the next meeting so that we can double check all what we assumed today?
Yeah. Yeah, I can reach out to Jessica to get him invited.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think his input will be valuable. At least speaking to different key structures and the information we can glean from them. All right, cool. It's a pretty good discussion. Does anyone have any other questions on or comments on any of this key stuff? All right, cool. Um, I had some updates we could give, but Keith, I know that you wanted to talk a little bit about your sample code guide. Did you want to save that for next time? I know we only have 5 minutes left, or did you want to try and quickly go through that now?
I mean, I just think it'll take a couple of minutes. So, and it's something more that people can take and comment on. So, um, oh, sorry, wrong screen. Okay. So, can you guys see my screen? Oh, you can see
Yeah,
my
totally
calendar, I guess.
can.
Yeah. Okay. So, as you guys know, in our current SDKs, we have lots of different samples about different sample transactions, and I think we're going to start. We need to start leveraging these more and more, especially in an AI world, because AI needs these kind of code samples, complete end-to-end code samples for AI to actually construct samples themselves. They need this kind of as a reference. So we have a lot of, in all of our SDK repos, we have these code samples. Also, like we have code samples in other places, like if you go to the portal, if you go to the playground, we have code samples. But I think one of my pet peeves, and I think an issue we've always had, is that we have a lot of inconsistencies around code samples. Like just some simple things like across code samples, like do we use my account ID or my private key? If you go across like 4 different code samples in Hedera between, let's say, blogs and the SDKs and this, you're gonna find like everybody uses their own way to define this. And it just means like, at least for me as a user, when I have like an environment file and I'm just trying to run different code samples, I need to have like this huge environment file with like 20 different everything set up for every different word that people use. And it's just annoying and it's unnecessary. So I put together this document, which I'm happy to share with everybody. This is like what I'm calling a reference code sample guide. What this means is that for Hashgraph employees or other people working on SDKs or other things, this is a guideline for like best practices when creating code samples to try to get more consistency. And some simple things would be like, always use an ECDSA key with an EVM address when doing a code sample. You can use hard coded or you can use environment file, but like always use these as the environment variable names on a go forward basis. And then just some other kind of things about what code samples should look like for more consistency. And also I think some like our better code samples have good logging. That's also inconsistent, but I think that's very helpful for people to see what's going on. And so there's an example here of like what this could look like. So I think at this stage, all we want is kind of comments and feedback on this proposal. I mean, there is the intention though that once we all agree to it, then we will enforce it going forward. So like you'll have to start following this. So make sure you're happy with it. And that's it. I will share this document. I think we're looking for your comments and feedback. Yeah, Hendrik.
One question I've seen it last week in one of my pull requests where I got some feedback from Rob, which is about operator ID and operator key. I use the word operator too, and Rob asked if we still want to name it operator. Is that still the name we have for that account that is using the client and that we would like to use everywhere?
I mean, it's all over the place, right? It just depends the developer who writes it. Like I showed the portal. They don't use that. They use my account ID, my private key. I think there's other
Yeah.
samples, which it's whatever the developer who wrote the sample chooses to use.
Yeah. Well, maybe you can give an insight. Have you heard something that it should be renamed or?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it was mostly just a discussion between Simi and I, a
Okay,
couple
okay.
of weeks ago about possibly renaming operator, just because operator may not be a clear, I guess, a descriptive name of what it actually does. So, I mean, we were just throwing around ideas, and we thought fee payer maybe a good one. But I mean, I think any like regardless, like for this is like this would be for examples like at least how I understand it, it's like maybe we want to go back and edit our current examples to follow these, and then also examples going forward would follow these too. And then if we did end up wanting to change operator to a different name, then that would be something we would do in V3. But I think this is mostly speaking to
Yeah.
uh
I,
yeah.
I think it's first, let's come to agreement on what we want to use, and then we can decide about how we want to implement that. But yes, I mean, I'm open, whether it's operator or, I mean, part of me is looking at like, what's the least amount, what have we used the most in the past, and then what should we use in the future? But I
Yeah.
need to drop, but thank you guys so much. And I'll share this document after the call.
Yeah, I
All right,
think
sure.
Thank you.
I'll put up a doc for this in the SDK hub as well, so it can live somewhere public. But all right, yeah, sounds good. Thanks everyone for joining. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.